I was very excited to get my hands on Foregone. The game looked a lot like Dead Cells, but it also looked like a Metroidvania, which to me seemed like the best of both worlds. Not that I dislike roguelites, in fact, I love roguelites. I just really wanted to try that formula in a Metroidvania world. But I was wrong. I was wrong to assume it was a Metroidvania, and I was wrong to even start comparing it to Dead Cells, and I think that other reviewers are also going to make that same mistake. You see, the problem with comparing two games, while we do want our games to be better and we should measure them against each other, if you go into one game directly comparing it to another game, you're unfortunately going to hold the former game's mechanics up on a pedestal. Then, the game that you have in front of you, every deviation from those mechanics or those stylings is going to look like something negative, and that's the wrong way of looking at this. Instead, yes, we should be saying one game is better than another, but when we look at a game, we should look at it as a closed ecosystem. The game is the mechanics and the art style and the gameplay and the entire presentation all mashed together. Then we should compare how all those things work within itself versus how all those things worked within themselves in another experience. The problem, I think, is too many people are going to compare this game to Dead Cells, and they have way more unlike each other than they have things similar. And in that context, I think people are going to sell Foregone short when it's actually a really good game. Foregone opens up with its best foot forward. Though it does have a pretty lackluster story overall, it opens fairly well and has a starting section that leads you into the story with quite a bit of curiosity. The graphical style, the voiceovers, the audio work, it all just meshes really, really well and leaves the player with a very positive feeling.
Go back, Arbiter, and destroy the hero and its source.
About 45 minutes in or so, the game starts to slow down and a few of the weaknesses of the game start to rear their head. My primary criticism here, and the key weakness in this game, is the early game's gameplay. In the very first half an hour, it doesn't seem apparent that there is too much wrong with how the game looks and feels as you're fighting enemies and jumping from platform to platform. However, anybody that's played a game similar to this, like Dead Cells or Castlevania or Metroid, the 2D ones at least, they'll know something doesn't feel right with the platform elements. There's a dash missing, or there's some skill that you're missing to make the game truly feel right. And that's because this game feels like it was designed with all the things unlocked at the end of the game, and then the developers needed to create some sort of a progression system, so they stripped away some elements of that gameplay. This is the exact same thing that the original Kingdom Hearts fell victim to. At the end of the original Kingdom Hearts, the gameplay is fairly good, and you have long combos and can dodge and do all kinds of really cool moves. However, the developers decided that they needed a progression towards that combat, so they stripped away large parts of it, and in the beginning of the game, the combat feels sluggish and unsatisfactory. In the beginning of the game, you are lacking a versatility in your arsenal, and you're lacking an air dash, all of which really make the gameplay come together and feel that much better. While that first half an hour of combat may feel fine, it eventually starts to get stale and isn't refreshed until you've unlocked more combat abilities in the game. The silver lining is, though, that those abilities do come, and while there might be a little bit of a lull and a little bit of stagnation about 2 hours into the game, soon after that point, more things unlock and the combat becomes really polished. Of course, a great combat system in and of itself is not going to keep the player's attention for very long if there isn't good enemy versatility, and here there are plenty of enemies and they are very diverse in the way that they attack the player, which brings the whole thing together. Yes, there is some repetition in enemies, and yes, they do some recoloring and elite versions of enemies, but you can see past that because the number of enemies they have in the game is quite numerous. All of this, though, gets tied together with the graphics and animations, and this is where Foregone really shines. It's also where I think most people are going to fall into the trap of comparing this game to Dead Cells. Yes, the gameplay and the graphics look similar, but that's about as far as it goes. I do have to go out of my way to point out the animations in this game, which is not something that I always comment on in video games. As I was playing it, multiple times I had to stop and just watch an enemy do their moves because I found the intricate, awesome details in every animation to be really amazing. Something about how everything flowed together, and maybe it's part of the graphic style just being somewhat muddied. It just made the animations look that much better. The game starts out with a story about how you're the savior for a world that is on the brink of Armageddon. You have to undo some sort of large tragedy. This is a very common game story and nothing really to write home about. As I previously said, it does execute pretty well for about the first half an hour, but after that point it gets relegated down to text tombs and kind of just drags the character through the rest of the game. In playing this savior of the world, you are given a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. And in the beginning of the game, it's a sword and a pistol, but you quickly find new guns and new swords in the game on the ground by killing enemies. Once you unlock the outpost, which is a little ways into the game, you're able to then upgrade those weapons, and you also find armors and earrings and necklaces that you can also upgrade that modify your character with abilities, but also stat bonuses. As you play through the game, you collect two different currencies. One is for upgrading your skills and abilities, which you also find as you progress through the game, but the other is your gold, which is used to upgrade your weapons and armors that you find in the game. For the skills and abilities upgrades, you're able to take branching different choices on each skill so you can customize it to fit your playstyle, but there's also some branching skill sets on your player itself where you can customize how your player has critical hits or does different plague infections or things like that. The choices in the end aren't very branching, and you can't customize to a great degree, but just having a little bit was a welcome addition to the game. The game is broken up into different waypoints, and you can teleport to each one and then complete a segment of the game. If at any point you die, you'll go back to the outpost, but then you'll also lose all of your blue and gold currency, so it is in your best benefit to teleport back to the outpost as frequently as you can to upgrade and change out your equipment. The catch here is that as you upgrade things, you need more and more currency, which means you'll have to take a bigger and bigger risk holding on to all that currency so that you can upgrade your abilities to their highest degree. After finding about 3 or so teleports back to the outpost, you'll be confronted with a boss, and the bosses in Foregone are pretty well designed. Each one has a punishing but fair set of patterns that you'll have to get used to in order to beat the boss. Now, one alternative around this is to just out-level and out-upgrade your equipment so that you can just overpower the boss, but for most people, you're going to have to learn that pattern. It may take about half a dozen tries for each boss as you change out your equipment and make some different subtle changes to your equipment and your skill loadouts, but eventually you will win and you'll continue on through the game. So what was my overall impression of this game? Well, it started out very positive. In fact, the first half an hour I was loving this game, but then I soured on it a little bit about an hour in because the gameplay got a little stagnant as I didn't have those skills to make it fun again. About the time that I beat the first official boss and got the air dash, the combat really took off and this started to feel like a premium tier action platformer. I still very much would warn people against comparing Foregone with Dead Cells. Dead Cells was designed as a roguelite game that was made to be speedrun. This game is one that sure can be played quickly, but is one where it's supposed to have a good story behind it, and you're supposed to progress in one direction from the beginning to the end of the game. The combat mechanics in these two games do represent a different approach to a similar gameplay style. They're both action platformers, but one is a little bit slower and one is a little bit faster. If you are geared more towards the quickness of Dead Cells, you're going to like it more. if you're the type of player that doesn't like that very fast combat, you may actually like Foregone more. Know that there's a difference, and know that the two games are similar in how their gameplay executes. My opinion though is that this game is probably worth a solid 20 bucks. If it was over 20, I would say maybe wait for a sale because you're taking a little bit of risk on it if this game is for you. If this is under 20 bucks, totally worth it. Run out and buy it for sure. I really liked it. I would not think twice about spending $20 on this game for sure, and I'm definitely going to play it through to the end. As a matter of fact, I've been doing a playthrough of this game on my secondary channel. If you want to check that out, look at the sidebar on my channel. It'll take you over there, and you can see I have the first 3 or 4 parts up already. I'll be posting more parts up very soon. So you did it! You made it to the end of my video, and that means that you should probably like it because you made it this far. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I encourage you to go look at some of my other videos, and if you like my content, then subscribe because you can get more content like that as I release new videos. Thanks for hanging out with me, and until next time, this has been Pixel.